In this video, we continue with group policy. First, we'll talk about scope of management or order of inheritance. To show this, let's take a look at another policy here, which I made for computer configuration. Now, what it will do is it's going to prevent users and computers from accessing or using in-private browsing in Internet Explorer. In-private browsing disables the ability to track your history, some of the cookies, and other forms of data by preventing Internet Explorer from storing data about your browsing session. Although I have already created this ahead of time, but I haven't really set this up yet. So I need to right-click and choose Edit. Go to Administrative Templates, go down to Windows Components, then Internet Explorer, then down here to Privacy, click on Turn Off in Private Browsing, then Enable Turn Off in Private Browsing, click OK. Then all I need to do is link it to Hoyt computers where my Windows 8.1 computer is in. Note that user policies should be linked to organizational units containing users, for it only affects user accounts, while computer policies to organizational units containing computers, for it only affects computers. Although you can link GPOs to the domain itself. Then let's try if my Windows 8 machine can still use in private browsing. So I'm gonna try to open my Internet Explorer, click on Safety, then choose in private browsing, or you can just use the shortcut, which is Ctrl-Shift-P. And there, we can still use the in private browsing, but if we refresh our policy by running gp update, then open Internet Explorer again, click on Safety, then look in private browsing, but surely it isn't there anymore. Now, what does this have to do with scope of management or order of inheritance? This relates to how group policies apply and the order to which they apply. If the number of users, computers, and GPOs in an organization is quite a lot, it's very likely that at some point GPOs will conflict with one another. And it is very important for an administrator to know how they apply or which GPO should apply to which user or computer. So I'm gonna go to my domain controller right here, and here you can see that I've created a new policy that prevents users from changing their desktop backgrounds and linked it to Hoyt users organizational unit, and you can also see that it's been enabled already. So if I logged on as Hoyt user 01, I shouldn't be able to change the desktop background. But if I logged on as administrator, I should be able to change the desktop background because the administrator account isn't inside the Hoyt users organizational unit, but in the users container over here. But if you notice, the hide clock GPO, which is linked all the way up to the domain controller, is also enabled, which means that every user or computer inside the domain will inherit the policy. It will affect everyone, including the administrator account, because of the order of inheritance. This goes to show that multiple group policies may often apply to many users or computers because usually, by default, you have a list of default domain policies, including password policies linked to everybody in the domain. So the settings are going to be applied cumulatively as long as they don't conflict with one another. Like here, we have the default domain policy that applies to all users and computers in the domain. Then we got the hide clock, which also applies to everybody in the domain. Plus we got prevent changing the background here, which applies to the Hoyt organizational unit and everything inside it. And lastly, we got turn off in private browsing here in the Hoyt computers. So we have 4 policies that apply cumulatively to Hoyt computers organizational unit, given that there is no conflict between the policies. And if there are conflicts between the GPOs, here are things you have to keep in mind. First is that the last policy that is read in the processing order will take effect. For example, here in the domain, I enabled turn off in private browsing computer, which means that every computer in the domain would have in private browsing in their Internet Explorer disabled. But down here in Hoyt computers, I have turned off in private browsing computer, which then enables the in private browsing feature of Internet Explorer. And since that the GPO all the way down here from Hoyt computers is read last, This should be the one that should take effect in the computers in the organizational unit. Let me just show you if we could really use in private browsing here in my Windows 8 computer. And there it is. And as for conflicts between computer GPOs and user GPOs, computer GPOs will always take precedence. And if you want to know what policies are applied to a certain user or computer, you can go down here to Group Policy Results, right click here and choose Group Policy Results wizard, then select a specific computer or type the name of the computer, click Next, and then select a specific user, then click Finish. Then it will show you what GPO policies are being applied to this computer. These policies inside denied GPOs are denied because they apply only to users, and what we're looking at right now are computer details. But if we scroll down to user details, you'll see that the GPOs denied above are the ones applied here. Now if you want to make an exemption to the policy for a certain user, for example, this policy right here, which applies to authenticated users inside this organizational unit, where you can see here in advanced that authenticated user can read and apply group policy. Now to make the exemption, you need to go to advanced, click on add, enter the name of the user. You may still check read, but you wouldn't want them to apply the group policy. So you need to check on deny for apply group policy, then click OK. Are you sure you want this? Yes, I do. Remember that this user is still part of the authenticated users, which should mean that this policy should also apply to this user. But because we denied apply group policy for this user, it overrides the permission given to authenticated users, which allow apply group policy. So now we have given this user exemption to the policy. Now let's talk about policies and preferences. And what are the differences and similarities between the two? Both are mostly registry punches, although policies are revertible to its default settings. Policy settings are permanent, while in preferences, user can reverse the settings. Policies are applied during startup, log on, or refresh, while preferences, you can apply or refresh and you can choose to not reapply once you removed a setting. Removing a policy reverts the settings to its default, while in preferences, it sticks to the registry even after deletion, unless you delete it directly from the registry or until a new policy is applied which reverts the previous settings. Policies also takes precedence over preferences, while preferences are not available in local GPO. They are often used for desktop icons or shortcuts, place URL on a desktop or set up a default home page, place a new item to send to options where you right click on a file, drive mapping, and copying, updating, or deleting files. Now for starter GPOs, these are policies that are commonly desired but not really required settings. These are administrative templates only, which are commonly used for roles, configure settings for various types of servers, laptops, and desktops, or configure settings for any security-sensitive items. It is also exportable. You can put them in zip files and transfer them to your lab environment, but you can't actually edit it, but you can use it as a template to create a new GPO. And that's the end of our video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned a lot in this video. For more videos, check out this link right here.